Hey guys, welcome to the round 13 preview of Footy Rants. I'm going to dive straight in. Don't want to fuck around anything. We've spoken everything Origin yesterday, so won't be hearing any more aside from any sort of players that have dropped out of those respective teams. So yeah, tonight we've got the Melbourne Storm up against Newcastle Knights. So we've got first up against the last place team. Interestingly enough, the Storm won both of their games against Newcastle last year, who were absolutely struggling, as you know, who ended up getting the wooden spoon, but only did so by 4 points in both games. So a little bit of psychological advantage, I guess, for the Knights. They won't be feeling too underdone, and the fact that they have improved so much in that 12-month gap. We've seen, we've got the halves pairing there of Brock Lamb and Jalen Feeney that are starting to get a little bit of continuity together, and Danny Levi is starting to find his feet. The big loss, obviously, for the Storm we see is Will Chambers, who'll miss a week due to that shot on Mitchell Pearce, which is pretty unfortunate. Like I said in the podcast yesterday with the Origin, I think all's fair in love and war. If you're going to suspend Chambers, I think you probably got to suspend Boyd Cordner as well for his part in the tackle on Nate Miles. That's just my view on it. Billy Slater, you hear a lot of people sort of saying, he's going to have a massive game and turn it on. But I don't know. To me, Billy Slater doesn't seem like one of those sort of guys who's going to go out and play in spite of not being picked, or, this is opportunity now to make sure that he's going to get picked for Origin 2. I think Billy Slater's going to go out there and do what he's been doing all season for the Melbourne Storm, and that's continue to show up on that right-hand side and create space as that ball-playing fullback. And just make sure that he's getting good meters along with Addo Carr and Vunivalu. Spoken about Cameron Smith and the fact that he had to play big minutes, played the whole game on Wednesday night, and, it's only 2 days post. So it's going to be a big ask to get another 80 minutes out of him, especially at his age. I'll be very surprised if we don't see either Slade Griffin come into the lineup or Brandon Smith make his debut. Probably unlucky not to get a sniff, earlier when they played the Rabbitohs in Perth, Brandon Smith. But it's good to see him picked in that reserve spot. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does find his way onto that bench somehow. Another big plus for Melbourne Storm, and someone who I think will want to make amends is Jesse Bromwich, their captain, along with Smith in that leadership group. Obviously now has been removed from that after his actions with the cocaine bust, along with Kevin Proctor after the Anzac test. But yeah, I think he'll definitely come out and want to make a statement and play over the top, as I make mention of so often with this Newcastle team. Daniel Saifiti and Josh Starling, probably not your most damaging starting front row pairing. It's not exactly two names that come to mind when you're talking about genuine damage. As far as Glasby starting, I'd be pretty surprised if he does start. The fact that Jordan McLean's just come out the back of an Origin camp, I think he'll probably get his just deserves and find his way back into that starting side. But Glasby has been doing a job as well. We've seen some of the genuine push that he had up the middle and created some space for Slater and Cronk during that Rabbitohs game a fortnight ago. So either way, I don't think they lose too much up front, whether they start McLean or Glasby. Looking over to the Newcastle lineup, we see Dane Gagai in the 1 jersey and Brendan Elliott in the reserve. So Nathan Ross, the Ross dog, is back for Newcastle, and that's obviously a big plus. He's a big cult hero, and they'll want every little plus that they can manage in that starting 13 for Newcastle. So, and the only other sort of change that we've seen there is Mitch Barnett and Luke Yates have done a little swap around, so that edge in the middle. So, I think Barnett, he offers a lot in that forward pack, especially now Sione Matauti is starting to find a little bit of form and get comfortable with playing in that left edge role, as opposed to playing in the wing centre position like his older brother Peter does. So, the fact that the Storm have got a few blokes. Well, Chambers is out. I expect young Tonamapea to come in there and do a job for them, as he's done already 3 or 4 times this year. yeah, some tired legs from the Origin camp. I think they'll counter it pretty well, but in saying that, the Knights they're slowly building a little bit of momentum. It wouldn't surprise me if they manage to claw their way off the bottom of the ladder and the Tigers find a way to win that wooden spoon. I think it'll probably be a toss-up between them and the Rabbitohs. I think that Newcastle will probably put up a bit more of a challenge than what people give them credit for. So, yeah, for that reason, I think I'm going to tip a Storm victory, but mainly based off the fact that they're playing at home and they've just got a little bit more up front, and they'll play over the top of them. When you got blokes like McLean and Nelson Asafa-Solomona penciled in to come off your bench, that's a pretty handy impact and size as well, which Newcastle don't really have. So yeah, I'm tipping a Storm 1-12 victory, first last place in this round 13 clash. Moving on to the next game, we've got Parramatta versus the New Zealand Warriors. We've seen earlier in the season that was Kieran Foran's first game back in the NRL up against his former club, and had a bit of a field day. They didn't absolutely smoke Parramatta, but yeah, the Warriors came out on top 22-10, and the big stat that faces the New Zealand Warriors is they haven't won in Australia so far this year. But again, if we look across the Parramatta side, still obviously missing Corey Norman. He's out for still another 3 to 5 weeks, I believe, with that MCL. So I think in a certain aspect, it's a positive thing for Parramatta. It's like they know this is what the hand that they've been dealt. We can really put some time into getting Gutherson and Moses working together over the next few weeks and just try and generate that momentum so that when Norman does come back, they can hit the ground running. And it's going to be interesting to see what sort of shuffle they come up with, because you obviously expect that it's going to be Norman and Mitchell Moses in the halves. So you've already got Bevan French back at one now that he's fit. He's been back the last couple of weeks. So where does Gutherson find himself? Does he go back out onto a wing? Does he play in the centres and Avar is out of the side? It's going to be a tough decision for Brad Arthur to make, but there's still plenty of strike there out the back. We've seen the form that Josh Hoffman sort of played himself into last week, but again, you come back to that New Zealand Warriors side, and it's the New Zealand spine. Tuivasa, Sheck, Foran, Johnson, Isaac Luke, not to mention now that they've got the strike power of Solomon Akata back. That's obviously a big plus. Plenty of experience. Jacob Lillyman, I would expect, will come back into that side. For mine, the fact that Sam Lasone and Albert Vete played so well last week, I would probably drop Bunty Afoa back to Queensland Cup. Either that, or you just go 4 big men up front and then drop Nathaniel Roach if you think Isaac Luke can play 80 minutes, but he hasn't done so for the last few weeks. So yeah, there's some interesting matchups there. Obviously, it was good to see Johnson bring out that running game against the Broncos, despite them, being under strength. But I think they're going to derive a lot more confidence out of that win against the Broncos, even though it was under strength. You're still playing against the experience of Benji Marshall and the return of Ben Hunt. And they still had plenty of strike power. Alex Glenn was still out there. Blair was out there. The strike power of James Roberts was out there, and that was evident. He scored that try. So there's chips in each basket there. They're quite even paced for where they sit on the ladder. Stats don't really split them too much. They've had a very, very similar start to the season. Show small patches of form and then shy away. They really struggle to put an 80-minute performance together, and that's what both coaches will be looking for these two outfits to come up against each other and really start to play for the full 80, not just periods. So for me, I think just that little boost of confidence, even though it was against an understrength Broncos team last week. The fact that Sean Johnson got his running game going a little bit, and the fact that Kieran Foran will come up against his former club again, I think he'll just sort of rise to the occasion. Ben Madalino starting to find his stride back in in NRL again, and he'll really want to leave with some momentum before he heads to the Tigers next year. So for me, I'm going to tip the Warriors to get their first win in Australia this year. So if you're having a look there, on the punt, $3.60, 1-12, the Warriors. So that's where I'm looking. The Kemba Marlowe obviously had a big game against the Bronx last week as well, so I'm really keen to see the matchup there with the outside backs. There's some real strike weapons for both sides. I'm really keen. And, there's another little matchup with Kaiser Pritchard. He's probably been one of the surprise packages. Him along with Cameron McInnes has probably been the two surprise nines out of the comp this year. And he'll be really keen to stick it to someone with the experience of Isaac Luke. He's played in grand finals, World Cups. So for me, that's just that little bit of difference. If Lasone and Vete can bring that sting off the bench again and get them on the go forward, I think back end of the game, Parramatta may struggle for that continuity. But again, it's going to be the team who plays the most consistent footy for the full 80, and both teams are really yet to sort of do that so far this season. Moving on to our next game, so we've got the Dragons up against the Tigers. So 5th versus 15th place. We see there that the Dragons are heavy favourites. Tui Lolohea comes into the lineup from the Warriors, so he's made that transfer effective immediately. And after the game against the Broncos a couple of weeks back, it was pretty evident that the halves pairing of Rankin and Littlejohn wasn't going to cut it while Luke Brooks is out. They're real desperate. They're really desperate. I think Tedesco is obviously going to bring back a lot of confidence and spark to this side, and it wasn't through lack of trying. He was definitely their best against the Broncos. I think he was denied 4 times a try against the Broncos. Whether that effort again alone is going to be enough, and I don't. Whether him and Lolohea, well, they obviously haven't really trained together because Tedesco's been in camp all week. So, there's going to be a few things to iron out there before anything starts to really gel, I think. And now that the Dragons have sort of broken that losing streak, they had all that rush of success and then went 3 in a row losing streak. Finally chalked up that really convincing win over in New Zealand, which was positive, and then coming into the bye. We all know that coming into the bye, you really want to get that win and get that break, knowing that you've sort of earned it. You don't want to lose that game and then you're having a week off and you're trying to amend everything and you start getting in your head a little bit more. So it's good to step away from the game just knowing that you're going to come back refreshed and everything's sort of back on the up rather than the opposite. See Khalifa Faifailoa keeps his, at the moment he's penciled in to keep his spot. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Dugan. He's been named in the reserves as is Frizzell, so that's obviously just on standby, just depending on how they pulled up from the weekend. I'd expect both of them to return, but Field you would expect will definitely keep his spot on the bench, and they may pull Dugan, who came off, I think it was a minute short of the end of the game on Origin, just was lacking a bit of match fitness and getting tossed into something like that. I think it would be a little bit silly to expect him to put another 80-minute performance together. Again, I could be wrong. At the end of the day, it comes down to the relationship of the player and the coach, and he may want to rip in and he's feeling good, but from my experience in strength conditioning coaching, you want to give players little targets to get through, and you don't want to start to overload them too quickly, because then that's when that risk of injury starts to escalate a little bit out of control. Whilst it's not the halves pairing that they would definitely hope for, the Dragons, they're still definitely missing Gareth Widdop. But Kurt Mann really stood up in defence against the Warriors a fortnight ago, and I think he's sort of finding his feet a little bit, working out what his role with Josh McCrone sort of looks like a bit more now. And the fact that he was able to start working, getting on the outside and creating that space for Tim Laffey, who's been on fire this year. He's really found some form at the Dragons, and it's good to see. So if Dugan does come out and play, which I suspect he will, having Lafai and Dugan, you would expect that Dugan will slot back into the fullback role, and there'll be the full reshuffle, with Nightingale back to the wing. Fife will just drop out. So it's probably not the team that we see on paper. Another big plus is Jack de Belin having spent a New South Wales camp under his belt now, and he'll be keen to bring back what he's learnt and stick it to some of these New South Wales forwards. He'll be keen to get stuck in the captain in Aaron Woods. Chris Lawrence obviously comes with a heap of experience. Elijah Taylor is their absolute workhorse. Sorry, he never stops trying, and they're the sort of blokes that you want on your team. Elijah Taylor, he's probably a bit more of a Mr. Fix-It. He's never going to lose you a game, but at times he's probably not going to have the creative spark at this point in his career to win you a game. But you definitely need those sort of guys on your team. If they can, you have a look at this back five. There's some talent there. We've seen bits and pieces from Norfoluma. Obviously came out. I think round 1 was his absolute gun game. Tore up. I think it might have even been the Bunnies round 1. But yeah, he's one of the leading offloaders in the competition. So they'll definitely have to make sure they nullify that and try and reduce the amount of footy that Norfoluma palms off. Zalesniak sort of found his way into that starting side since moving from Penrith. And Sully's finding his feet. Obviously only a young kid defending in one of the hardest positions on the field. He's starting to develop that relationship with Nguama. And Nguama's always solid out of the back. He's going to give you good carries and try his best to get you on the front foot. So if the forwards can stand up, which they'll definitely have to, with the form that Packer and Vaughan have showed, they've been just so demanding. You know what I mean? Like they just don't give a fuck. They're ruthless, and I love the confidence that they're both playing with, and I hope that they continue to do that. So if that is the fashion that they bring on the weekend, I think it spells danger signs. They beat them 28-6 earlier in the season, and I wouldn't expect too much less, to be honest, if they can get on the front foot, unless Lola here can pull something creatively out of his ass, and find this spark connection with certain players straight off the bat, or perhaps some strokes of individual brilliance. I think just the consistency and the renewed confidence that the Dragons will play with will see them get back in the winner's circle quite well. Alrighty, moving on to our next game. It's a bit of a shame, this one. So we got the Bronx up against the Roosters. Pull all that up if it wants to hurry up. Tick tock, tick tock. Bear with me, guys. Let's give this a refresh. So no Pearson and no Milford is the big loss. That they'll both succumb to HIA after the Wednesday night's Origin. Oops. Anyway, I'll keep rolling through with this. So big losses there. Big pluses for the Broncos is the return of Andrew McCulloch after that sickening concussion against the Tigers. He caught the hip of Kyle Lovett, and big head gash, and there was a bit of concern there for him for a little while, but he's obviously come good. From all reports, Milford is the only one who will miss any sort of influence for the Broncos. All other Origin players are set to play. One big bit of confidence that the Roosters will bring into this game is the fact that when they were so under strength last week against Canberra, and Canberra were, I shouldn't say only missing Papali, but when you look at it in comparison to how many players the Roosters were missing through Origin, it was a brilliant performance. So the fact that Pierce is out now, you'd think they'll stick with Connor Watson. I don't see the point in, whilst I don't think it was the best halves pairing now, they're both a little bit too similar for mine. But I don't think they'll bother changing it now. And same with the Broncos. I think they'll both go with the same halves pairings, despite both clubs coming off a loss last week. So I think you'll see Benji Marshall get another crack in the 6 jersey with McCulloch back at 9, and you'll probably keep Cody Nikorima on the bench there, and he might just come on. He may even just come a straight swap for Benji Marshall. He might just float around the middle for one of the forwards just to try and raise that ruck speed up a little bit and try and get in behind some of these tiring forwards. You know, we've got Napa and Cordner backing up, but I can't really see those guys taking too much of a backward step, to be honest. They're too experienced, and it's their full-time job now. You don't see too many blokes take a backward step, especially the fact that they're still so young, Napa and Cordner. I think someone like a Thaiday and a Gillett, they're going to feel the pinch a little bit more. So it'll be interesting to see whether Thaiday does actually start and Corbin Sims, or whether they continue with what Bennett has been doing and then starting those two off the bench with Assesi and Glenn starting. Yeah, so it's a big shame that we're not going to see Pearce and Milford go at it again. But the big plus for me is around Andrew McCulloch. I think he's going to make a big difference. We see the work rate that he has in defence for the Broncos. The Roosters have won the last 3 at Allianz, but overall, the Broncos have had a reasonable record there. They've won 14 of 23 attempts. But yeah, in recent times, it hasn't been the happiest of hunting grounds. Defensively, we've seen how much Luke Keary relies on Boyd Cordner. So the fact that he's coming into an extra game on such a short turnaround, I really think the Broncos will look to exploit that and really get some footy travelling Cordner and Keary's way, and really test Cordner's ability to protect his half. So if I'm the Broncos, that's something that I'm looking to exploit. But because of some of the dynamics that we're losing now off Pearson and Milford, and the Bronx blew them out of the water earlier in the season, 32 points to 8. That was pretty much the Roosters' first big loss after the momentum that they built during the first 4 to 5 rounds. For me, it just has a bit of a sniff of Golden Point written on it. So I think this is going to be a really tough game. The forwards are going to just slug at it again. If we see, Connor Watson get his chance, can he sort of have a bit more joy on those edges, on those fringes? Will it actually play the other way, and they'll look to isolate, Thaiday and Gillett playing some extra minutes again? So yeah, I think it could go either way. But in saying that, it may blow wide open. One team may not be able to go with it with those Origin stars. But for me, I think it's going to be really, really close. And without Pearce, I think Pearce just has a bit more influence on the Roosters' attack than Milford does on the Bronx. I think that the Bronx can still steady the ship, especially with McCulloch back there in the middle again. And I've already said it 1,000 times. So for that reason, I'm going to tip a bit of an upset. We can see up the top here, the Bronx are 220 outsiders. I'm going to pick the Bronx by 1. Whether it does end up at Golden Point, I think, there's going to be some field goals to decide the result of this game. Now, to my beloved Cowboys, who are still Thurstonless, despite you can see Thurston down there in the reserves named in 19. I think we can safely assume that that's not going to happen. Nathan Peets, I'm not sure, from what I've been hearing, that nasty cork. I'll leave it. I was reading an article yesterday that drove home the heroism of Nathan Peets playing on one leg. Yeah, I can appreciate corks get bad, but fuck me, we've seen some pretty brave performances in the past that are worse than a fucking cork. Anyway, moving forward. So yeah, Nathan Peets may miss that game due to that cork, which would be a big hole because obviously he's been picked in that New South Wales team for a reason. So the reshuffle, it'll be interesting to see which way they go if he doesn't play, whether Roberts just slots in there and Will Zillman might come in a fullback. Does Jared Hayne come in a fullback and they do a big reshuffle? So does Copley slot into the centres and then Zillman onto the wing? It'll be interesting to see which way they go, whether they want to fully disrupt that back line and switch it right up, or try and just minimise that and keep Tyrone Roberts around in the middle, and Zillman's played plenty of fullback. Um, I think they'll probably go with that, just because Jared Haynes has got to come back full of confidence. I don't think there's any denying that. But do you try and play on that by putting him in the one jersey and say go wild, or it's like, well, no, you had a solid performance in the centres for New South Wales, so just do the exact same for us. Especially, he's re-signed again for that extra year. Couldn't resist that $1 million paycheck, which how could you blame the bloke? You've got limited time to make money in this business, because that's what it is now. It's a business, so you might as well capitalise on it. Somehow, I think only because they're at home, the Cowboys are $1.50 favourites. I think there's massive value there. $2.65 for the Titans, and I said even without Pete's, I think the options that they've got. Zuman played really, really well for the Tweedhead Seagulls last week, and helped them with I believe it was a 21 points to 4 victory over competition leaders Redcliffe Dolphins. So for me, where I get a little bit panicky as a Cowboys supporter is just this backline. Their strike there. Anthony Don is playing the best footy of his career. He's finishing really, really well. That big rangy bloke, he brings, not too dissimilar to a Corey Oates in stature. Hayne and Harrell, that's just scary. Just seeing those two names alone up against O'Neill and Linnett. From what I'm hearing, O'Neill won't be playing just due to that concussion. So Javid Bowen will probably get his shot in there. So if I'm seeing Bowen and Linnett versus Hayne and Hurrell, I know which is scaring me more. Unfortunately, I think Hayne is just going to get really excited when he sees Captain Average Kane Linnett and could pretty much just turn on another performance. I think he's a player that's going to come back, and playing 80 minutes of Origin isn't going to affect him at all. If anything, it's going to boost his performance. Again, playing extra minutes again for Morgan. He's obviously going to tire a little bit to a certain extent. And Ray Thompson, he's been doing a really, really good job, I must say, for the Cowboys. He sort of came on and played that 9 role in his first game, and then was slotted into that halfback role. But when you're playing against the young enthusiasm of LG and Taylor, and then the list goes on. I mean, look at it. Wallace, Ryan, James, they've been probably the form forwards pairing up against Packer and Vaughan. They're probably the only other comparable front row forwards as far as, I guess, surprise packages, really. And then you got Asiata and Bolton. So I think that there's just a few mismatches. You just can't ignore the fact that Thurston and Scott offered so much to this team, and even though Tarmel probably didn't finish with the form that he did at the end of last year, that's just still strike power that you're missing. Hopefully Cohen Hess can come on. He manufactured their win basically single-handedly earlier in the season with a 2-try performance that saw the Cowboys get home 32-26. So that'll give the Cowboys a little bit of confidence, knowing that they've been there, done it, and got the job done. But Thurston was playing there, and we've seen how instrumental he is in creating that space for someone like a Cohen Hesse, Gavin Coopers, Ethan Lowe's on those edges. Michael Morgan has been doing a much better job at that because of his kicking game, and now that they've got that extra kicking option with Coot back in the last few weeks, as well as Jake Granville for the last few weeks, that is probably the only area where they can really exploit. So if Pete's is out, I think it's up to Jake Granville. He's pretty much going to be the linchpin for the Cowboys as to whether or not they sort of get home. But simply just due to that strike power in that back line, if they get on, if they really get on, and the fact that Jared Wallace is coming off the back of a Origin camp, much like I sort of alluded to with Jack DeBellin, I think you just can't help but bring back confidence, you know what I mean? So it's going to be a bit of a seesawing affair. I don't think it's going to blow out either way. I think it's going to be a close game again, as much as we've seen earlier in the season. Whether it's as high scoring as a 32-26, I'm not too sure. It will just depend on the concentration defensively. Both teams have sort of lacked this year. The Cowboys definitely aren't as defensively sound as they were over the last probably 2-3 seasons. And that's simply evident just with the firepower that they're missing. There's no two ways about it. You can't hide behind the facts. But unfortunately, as much as that pains me to say, this is a rugby league analysis show, and I just got to look at the stats and sometimes got to go beyond my heart and use my head, I'm going to have to tip against the Cowboys here. I think that the Titans, I'm just really worried that Hayne's going to come out and dominate and play all over these centres here. We know that O'Neill's probably not going to be there, but it's such an important position to be strong defensively in, and having someone like David Bowen come in who hasn't really played too much NRL this year, who's sort of been in and out of the side, you really need those combinations to be silky smooth when you're coming up against superstars like Hayne and Hurrell. So, who knows? I could be completely wrong, and then they turn up a defensive masterclass and defend their way to a victory. But it's a big but. I'm going to have to go with a 1-12 win to the Gold Coast Titans. On to our Sunday matches. Now, this should be an absolute clanger. Manly and Raiders, they turned on a Golden Point thriller earlier in the season where the little smart-ass Dylan Walker managed to redeem himself with a penalty kick at goal, and he basically did the Shane Warne at Adelaide Oval walk-off, come catch me. So based off that, he'll definitely want to repeat that, and Jared Croker will want to make sure that fucking doesn't happen again. And I don't think there'd be any better way to redeem yourself than getting a win at Brookvale Oval. We've seen, you've got the leading try scorer in your side in Jordan Rapana. There's just so much potential there. You see so much potential, but again, we're seeing that potential doesn't really get you too far. You've got teams like the Warriors that aren't performing. You've got teams like the Panthers that only have recently started performing. There's strike power out there. Every NRL club possesses it, but it's whether or not you can harness it and put it together for 80 minutes. And then once you get that 80 minutes, it's about doing it the week after again, and the week after again, and the week after again. And now that's why I think the NRL is the greatest competition in the world, is because you have so much talent across so many clubs, but for whatever reason, sometimes shit just doesn't work. And it's going to be really interesting to see whether this is another close game, again similar to the Parramatta and Warriors clash. These two clubs have had a pretty similar season, and you can see it there based off the head-to-head betting. There's not too much splitting them. The Raiders are in fact favourites, even though the Manly side are the home team. We've seen Matt Wright actually stand up and perform quite well in the absence of Tom Trbojevic a couple of weeks back. So whether he can replicate that performance, we will soon find out. The big concern for me, I see that team on paper and Papali's back this week, and you go, yeah, I've got to go with the Raiders. But then you look at the results that they've got, and they couldn't put away a severely understrength Roosters side last week. They were very lucky. They only sealed the game in like the last 30 seconds when Caesar picks up that ball and runs away to score. If Michael Gordon kicks that goal from the sideline, it goes to Golden Point. They've got all the momentum, and I dare say the Raiders probably lose that if Gordon kicks that goal. So, yes, you want to be winning those games. 2 points is 2 points, and sometimes you've just got to be happy to celebrate the win. I'm not disputing that, but, you look at facts, a team like that should be outperforming an understrength Roosters outfit. I sort of said if Paulo, Boyd, and Soliola could do enough, that was going to be enough. And that's all they did. It was just enough. But now you're coming up against, Brent Lawrence, who's probably put together 2 seasons of his best footy. Martin Tapau, we all know, he's the leading offloader in the competition. Even Winterstein and Sirinen, they've performed well at times. Trbojevic is going to come back and bring all his experience now, the fact that he's played a test match, he's played his first state of origin, he's not going to want to take a backward step. I'm not sure if Nate Miles will take part in this. So you'd probably expect someone like a Lloyd Perrott to come in if that is the case. So, yeah, look, there's pros and cons to both sides, and I think you're going to split it with you're like splitting hairs trying to pick a winner between these two sides, just because they've lacked form. I mean, if you look at the halves pairing, Green and Cherry Evans bring that experience and ability to build pressure. Caesar and Austin, they're not exactly, I don't know, who you would consider to be a genuine halves pairing. When you look at some of the halves pairings across the NRL, they're a bit unorthodox. Austin is very much similar to Josh Reynolds in the fact that he needs a few things going his way for the Raiders to be playing good and for him to be playing good footy. If he's up against a little bit of adversity and you get under his skin a little bit, he really struggles to steer the side around. He gets a little bit frustrated and you'll find that error in him. Whereas I don't think you find that too much with Green and Cherry Evans. They're a lot more orthodox and can sort of fall back on structure a little bit more when shit gets pear-shaped. Yeah, and it's for that reason alone that I'm going to go the Manly side. So again, I'm tipping another outsider. So it could go either way for me. If you're following along with my tips to put in for your own, we could be hitting the jackpot or we could be going to have a stinker this week. But yeah, I think the Manly side will get it done just because unless the Raiders can truly turn it around this week, play over the top, forwards dominate like they should. Papali and Whitehead, I think, are much better versed than Winterstein and Sirinen on those edges, but it's just whether or not they can put it all together for the full 80. Because if they can't put away an understrength Roosters side, only missing Josh Papali, I think they're going to have a tough time doing that against the Manly side. Simply because the Manly side, they destroyed the Titans a fortnight ago, which broke a losing streak for them and broke a winning streak for the Titans. And then they had the bye, refresh the bodies, come out, let's go, because the Raiders had to play last week. So I think a few fresh legs, they're coming off the back of a win. The Raiders were a shaky win. I'm tipping Manly 1-12. Into the last game of the round, we've got the Bulldogs, and this thing's going to play up on me again. I do apologise. So we got the Bulldogs versus the Penrith Panthers. It's going to be a really good clash. I'm really looking forward to it. Again, we can see the head-to-head betting there, $1.75 favourites with Penrith. So the biggest change we see is Matt Moylan is named at 6 for the first time ever. Yeah? And we see young Dylan Edwards, he'll get his place at the back. And he's gone out and done jobs before. He's already scored tries for Penrith playing at fullback this year. And I like that move. Cartwright's out injured, so I think that they'll come back stronger now that they've put together 2 half games. And now it's time to switch on and have a crack. Anthony Griffin, he won't want to see anything less. So there we go. Big changes. We see Matt Moylan named at 6, and a big inclusion, Josh Mansour, who returns after that ACL injury at the Four Nations tour in Europe last year. So I'm really keen to see. He's someone that I sort of love to hate. He's a bit of a whinger, but brings so much energy to that Penrith side. He's come through the system as a junior, and he's done so well. He got his start in Origin. He's got rep jerseys now, so he'll really be pushing to. It's going to be hard. I don't think Origin will be on his radar at all, and I don't think it'd be unfair to put that sort of pressure and expectation on him. He'll just want to come out and do a job, and the fact that he's coming up against Brett Morris will be something that he'll look forward to. Another fact that Moylan is playing 6, I think it's just they complement each other. He's going to complement Nathan Cleary a lot more as far as a 6-7 combination. We've seen Moylan's pretty much been playing that running role anyway as a fullback. He gets his hands on the footy so much more than what Cartwright was doing and what Tamari Martin was doing earlier in the season. So I think it's just natural. Just put the 6 on his back, bring another kid who does a great job at fullback for you for the club anyway, Dylan Edwards. And if you're looking at the 6 and 7, Moylan and Cleary, it's a pretty similar sort of lineup as far as, Mbai's used to running, and Frawley brings that bit more structure like Cleary does. So it's going to be interesting to see how each team utilises those attributes of the halves that they've got for this clash. You know, there's matchups again. Tolman and Graham, Tarmow, Campbell Gillard. Harawira has burst onto the scene. Yo's been scoring tries left, right, and centre. You come up against Josh Jackson, against another rookie in Adam Elliott. So, you know, there's a lot of similarities here. Trent Merrin will be dirty that he missed out on a rep jersey. He comes up against David Clemmer. So there's a lot to play for across the board. And I think that's why the head-to-head betting is quite close. The big plus for the Bulldogs is the fact that Penrith aren't playing at home. You know, the Penrith crowd loves getting out there and supporting their team. But again, a big difference for Penrith is going to be Tyrone Peachey off the bench. I thought he was pretty unlucky not to get a sniff for the New South Wales team. I think he just plays that utility role a bit better than Jack Bird. But, you know, we see Jack Bird went out there and did a job for New South Wales. Another difference that you'll see here for the Penrith side is Mitch Rain gets his first cap for the Penrith Panthers in the absence of Peter Wallace. So Peter Wallace he's still out for another 3 to 5 weeks with that groin injury, I believe it is. So yeah, he'll be really, really keen to come in and rip. He was obviously expecting to play a lot more NRL after leaving the Dragons, and you know, it'd be interesting to see if he's sort of living with any sort of regret having left the Dragons and the success that they're having now. And you know, did money issues sort of get in the way? I know he's sort of been shopping around. There was rumours that he was having conversations with Parramatta, I believe it was, but I think his asking price is a little bit too high for the results that he's got on the board at the minute. Yeah, so, you know, there's matchups all across the board. Now that Penrith have put together 2 40-minute absolute blitzes, it's time to put an 80-minute performance together. Because if you don't put an 80-minute performance together against the Bulldogs, they will just find a way to win. They will just grind and grind and grind and grind. And, you know, knowing that they're still not going to see Reynolds for another fortnight, you know, Frawley will want to be making the most of his time in that starting side. He'll know that he's probably going to, you know, if Hasler still wants him there, he'll play in that bench utility role as he has done so far over the last sort of, I think it was 3 weeks leading into that Reynolds injury that he was there for. And he brings so much value, that short kicking game. And it's just freed Moses Mbye. Whilst they haven't really got the results in recent times, the Bulldogs, you know, they'll still be confident. You know, Will Hopewadi's recommitted to the club now, and he'll want to come out and turn it on. And yeah, I think there's just so many similarities. That's just going to be whoever executes better. And I hate to say it, I know I've been putting my eggs in Penrith's basket and then I've sort of gone off them again before, but it's time for them to put an 80-minute performance together. And if they do, I think they're going to blow Canterbury out of the water. Just because the Bulldogs lack that attacking flair. If Penrith get on any sort of roll on like they have in their last 2 starts for 40 minutes, if they can even push that out to 60, I don't think the Dogs can go with them. I just don't think the Dogs can go with them. I think Tyrone Peachey is a massive plus off the bench. I don't think Craig Garvey is anywhere near as potent in replacing Michael Leacher as Tyrone Peachey will be in replacing Mitch Rain. I think Mitch Rain is just going to come out chomping at the bit. You know, he's going to make his tackles. There's not going to be any sort of questions there. And that forward pack for Penrith, like, let's go. Let's fucking go, Chant. Like, Regan Campbell-Gillard, I'm loving that kid. And Harawira, he's been fucking playing out of his skin as well. So if they perform, I think it could be a bloodbath. I'm tipping in a little bit of a left of field. I think the favourites in Penrith will win. I'm looking at a 13 plus at $3.60. So get around that. So, you know, toss up a few things, get into multi. I think you'll get some $12 value somewhere off three legs. And yeah, best of luck to you. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got for this week, guys. Again, apologies for a few of the technical errors there in loading some of the pages, but everything else aside, we'll be back to recap everything come Monday. So, you know, be safe, enjoy your footy, and we'll be back ranting again at the top of next week. Rightio, gang. Have a good one.